It's so good to meet you. Thank you so much for taking a minute out today.
Oh, I'm so glad to be here. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, you bet. So, as we kind of mentioned before, it's rare in this community to find a fellow Kansas Citian. So, we're coming from Kansas City, but let's begin our journey before we get into your writing and your book by asking you this. 5 years ago, we were knee deep into this pandemic, figuring it out. How much of living through that pandemic has influenced the way that you live life today?
It's really changed things a lot for me. We used to have dinner parties at least once or twice a week. We rarely have them anymore.
Yeah.
It's kind of sad, but it really has made a big difference in how we interact with people. We have a few close friends that we interact with. Of course, we interact with our church, but other than that, we don't socialize as much as we used to.
Yeah. I think that's the way it is across the board. I think people really pulled back on going and doing things like they used to, which is unfortunate because if we learned anything about being totally connected technologically during that time, we still realize that that human connection is the main thing about being a human on this planet.
Absolutely.
So,
And during that pandemic is when I wrote the book.
okay,
That's actually what, I mean, I had nothing else to do.
right.
So, so I completed my research. But what was strange is when I went to like KU to do research, had to mask up. You couldn't get close to even my husband when he went with me. They would say, "You can't stand next to each other." I couldn't ask him or hand him books very well. Hold this for me. It was a very interesting time.
It certainly was. So let's get to the heart of what you do right now in 2025. I'm going to put you in front of a bunch of fifth graders at career day, and one of the kids is like, "Hey, what do you do for a living?" How do you answer that child?
Well, right now, I write history books, and I bring to life history, actually, of my own ancestors. And if you look back in your ancestral history, you'll find some fascinating stories that you may want to write down and share with others as well. It's a great thing to do, and it's a lot of fun to research and find out what happened in people's hundreds of years ago.
What a great concept. I've heard this before about taking your family history and weaving it into this narrative because you're hitting so many birds with one stone. I mean, you're genuinely doing something that you're going to leave behind. You get a look because I mean, our bloodline as humans goes way, way, way back. And you know there's all these stories that have never come to light before, you know? So, that has to be wonderful. So, let me ask you this. When you were in the fifth grade, what was your dream? What did you want to be when you grew up?
Well, I had several dreams. One was an actress and a singer. I did a lot of that in college. I got my degree in that. I starred in a lot of college productions. I did some community theater. Um, Thoroughly enjoyed that. But I also wanted to be a writer. Even when I was that young, I loved and I loved telling stories. I was an avid reader, and it just seemed to go hand in hand with telling stories on the stage as well.
So, talk to me a little bit about where you were born and raised and how did you get this bug to write, to be on stage, to be in front of people, to create? How did this happen?
Well, I was born in San Diego, California, and I was raised there and in Los Angeles County. I think I was born with the bug to entertain because when I walked on stage, I felt free all of a sudden. I didn't feel fear. And so I loved acting. I haven't done it for quite some time. I've done directing and I've thoroughly enjoyed that. I've done playwriting. I've enjoyed that. I guess I've always loved every aspect of telling stories. and just sharing emotions and journeys and adventures with people. Um, my husband was in the military for a long time, so and I married fairly young. I was 18, and we traveled through many countries, lived overseas for a long time, and lived in Egypt, and I lived in Japan. I lived in Germany for 12 years. Um, so I had and traveled throughout Europe, Asia, and the Middle East. So I also gathered more a more rich feeling of what it was like to live hundreds of years ago. Because when you go to Europe, you feel like you're stepping back
Huh?
in time in many ways. The architecture just brings you there.
Yeah.
And it's a delightful experience that I wish everybody could have to live there, not just travel. Of course, living for a while in Egypt was a totally different experience because you felt like you were stepping back thousands of years instead
Yeah.
of hundreds. And
Yeah.
that was a fascinating experience.
That is so interesting you say that because Americans, because we always say we are the best country on the planet, we lose track of the antiquity of the rest of the world. Like when I went to Italy the first time, I was like, oh my God, this is like when I was in the Colosseum and I heard a cell phone ring and heard those contrasting echoes of now and then, and just feeling the antiquity of everything. It's wild. And yeah, anybody that lives in this country has to go and understand how young, because you realize how young of a democracy we're in,
Yes.
and it's not that big of a surprise why we fumble so much with what we do politically. Like there's so many things that go in to understanding how all of this works.
Yeah, still trying to find our way. You asked me how I got into writing this story. My aunt was the family genealogist, and she, I think she thought that my husband and I were good prospects to take over her job when she died. So when we got married, she gave us this huge genealogy chart. I had known from the time that I was very young that we had several lines that went back through European royalty, but I'd never really thought about it. Um, and she gave me a huge book of genealogy too. But as I was looking and tracing some of these lines and just looking at it, I came to one that was very strange. I see this 12-year-old girl, a princess, first princess of France, and she's marrying a 50-year-old man who is the king of Wessex. And then I see 2 years later, I see the same name married to this king of Wessex son, 24-year-old son. And I'm thinking, that's weird.
Yeah.
And then several years later, 3 years later, I see her married to the Count of Flanders. And I'm going, there's something wrong in my genealogy. And she gave me this job, so I'm going to go find what it is and I'm going to make it right. So I started researching, trying to find out where we went wrong on her genealogy chart. And instead, I came across the most amazing story of courage and just fascinating story of Vikings and adventure and wars and assassination plots. And it stayed with me for decades, actually. and and I would periodically tell my family about it. They loved it. But when it came to COVID, I thought, if anyone's going to write this story for my granddaughters and granddaughters and my grandsons, it's got to be me.
Yeah.
So then I really got serious about doing all the research on the ninth century and the whole family, the Carolingian dynasty. They were descended from Charlemagne. So they have many, many descendants now. You may be one. It's
Right.
just a lot of people just haven't followed their genealogy back that far.
Yeah. That's amazing. How did you end up in Kansas City?
Well, that was following my husband's job.
Okay.
Before this, we've lived on both coasts, and this was the first time we ended up in the middle of the country, and I love it. And I said we were actually previously in Virginia for a year and a half, and we had just come from 8 years in Germany. And I said, the next time we move, wherever it is, I'm staying. And we're going to stay here till we retire. And so my husband just retired this past week. So
Okay.
we are we're here. We're Kansas Cityans. We've been here for quite some time. We love the Chiefs. We love the Royals. We love the culture. We love the barbecue. We are definitely Kansas
Love
Cityans.
it. That's great. Yeah, especially, coming from San Diego and all these other places, I always wonder when people actually get to the point where they're like, we want to be in Kansas City or this is where we're at. Because it's not a surprise to me. I've been here my whole life and I've watched it grow and mature and turn into what it is. And it's not surprising, but there is a soft spot for people. They're always like, I never get rid of that Kansas City feeling. And anytime I can go back, I do, or people move here, so it's amazing. So I'm curious, as a performer, as a lover of literature, growing up, what was the first movie or production and book that really hooked you?
Oh, that's difficult. The first one, I don't know. I do know that I loved the classics.
Okay.
I loved Shakespeare. Even as a child, for some reason, I was just fascinated by Shakespeare's works. Um, I loved, um, I loved, I loved the musicals.
Yeah.
And when I was a kid, which was a long time ago, you could go to the movie on a Saturday and see a double feature for like 50 cents as a child.
Yeah.
And it was delightful. Um, Sound of Music, things like that. They were just bread and butter to me. I just couldn't get enough of it.
Yeah.
And I loved I kind of went, you say, an avid reader. I kind of would go on a tangent. So if I was into mysteries, then I'd read every book that Agatha Christie wrote.
Sure.
Or if I was um, into historical fiction, I would read probably the names you wouldn't even uh, Michener. You may not
Yeah.
know
Yeah.
some of those that were very popular then. Lloyd C. Douglas. There were a lot of Kenneth Roberts. They were very prolific writers
Yeah.
and very deep. Um, so that type of thing.
Yeah.
I loved Pride and Prejudice, so I had to read all of Jane
Of
Austen's.
course. Yeah. Yeah. So who's been a hero for you? Who's been an inspiration for all this work that you've done?
Um, that's also a good question. I'm not sure I have an answer for that.
Okay,
I
that's fine.
haven't thought about one particular person as being a role model for it. Maybe my mother, I
Okay.
guess.
Okay. So let me ask you
She
this.
loved to write and she loved to tell stories as well.
Yeah. Okay. So let me ask you this. Um, what are you the proudest of everything that you've done, everywhere that you've traveled to, all of the things that you've accomplished? What is it that you're the proudest of?
I would, well, I would say family.
Yeah.
Just that's what it all comes back to, doesn't it? Our
Yeah.
relationships, as you talked about before. The fact that my husband and I are still married after 50 years,
Yeah.
we're, that's an accomplishment, and we're happily married. And we have 4 children and 11 grandchildren.
Wow. Nice.
Um, of course, there are things I wish that I had done. That's part of life. You realize, oh, maybe that decision wasn't the best. But the important thing is that we learn from all of our choices and even our mistakes. That's sometimes the best way to learn.
Yeah. Yeah. It certainly is. So let me ask you this. What's been the response to your book? Have you gotten fan letters? What kinds of responses have you gotten?
People have loved this book.
Yeah.
And the interesting thing is that men love it as well as women
Okay.
because it actually follows this couple, not just Judith, who is the first princess of France, but her third husband. His name is Baldwin Iron Arm, and he is a knight, and he is a powerful knight. And it follows both of their lives in parallel until they join together. And then it becomes their story. So the men, it actually starts out with Baldwin coming to the court of King Charles, Judith's father, and he becomes the companion and mentor to Judith's younger brother. Judith is only 11 at the time, Baldwin's 16, and her younger brother is 9. But this is how they first meet. Judith is married at the age where the minimum age for marriage in the court of Francia at that time was 12 years old for a girl.
Yeah.
So they waited until she turned 12, married her off for political purposes to the King of Wessex, and she leaves and goes to England and is the first anointed Queen of Wessex.
Wow.
Baldwin, at the same time, is as companion to her younger brother, Louis the Stammerer, gets involved in all kinds of exciting adventures back in Francia. He is trying to protect young Louis from assassination plot. He's from war, from uh, rebel lords, all kinds of things, trying to take over his little part of the kingdom that his father has asked him to watch over, even though he was only 9 at the time.
Yeah.
So it's an interesting story. So we see what is happening in Francia, we see what is happening in England. And when Judith finally returns to Francia, she says, I'm not marrying again. And her father says, yes, you are, because she's twice widowed by the age of 15. So she returns, she's 16, she doesn't want to marry again at her father's command. And her father says, I'm going to lock you in this palace and you will not leave until you agree. At this time, she's reunited with her brother, Louis, and his companion, Baldwin. She is imprisoned for over a year before Louis and Baldwin help her escape. And Baldwin and Judith fall in love and they elope.
Wow.
then they're chased all over Europe
Yeah.
by King Charles's men and eventually flee to Rome. So Rome is very much a part of their story, where they stay for about 2 years while they are battling in the court before the Pope, arguing their case, why they should not be excommunicated, why they should be allowed to remain married. And King Charles has sent his own attorney down there to argue against them. And basically, Baldwin's arguing for his life, because if he's taken back and taken into custody, he will probably be killed or at least blinded by the king for
Interesting.
stealing his daughter.
Wow. That's fascinating. So if anyone wants to pick up the book, they want to learn more about you, any of the good business, where do they go?
Well, they can go to Amazon or anywhere, Barnes and Noble, anywhere books are sold. And it's D.H. Morris, The Girl of Many Crowns. I have a copy of the book right here.
Yes.
And it's a fascinating read. And every event in there is real. It's dramatized because you need to put dialogue and feelings and emotions in there, but it is real history brought to life. And they become uh, one of the founding couples of what becomes Belgium. So it is definitely a woman and a man's history and worth your time. People have loved it. It on Amazon. It has a 4.5 rating, I think. So, and people have said it's wonderful. So, I hope your listeners will pick it up and enjoy it
Absolutely.
if
And I
they
will,
love history.
yeah, for sure. And it's such a great story. I will make sure to shout it from the mountaintops, get the links in there. It's so great to meet you. So great to meet a fellow Kansas Cityan. Thank you so much for taking out some time today. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Joe, for having me.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Hello, friends. Joe Dimino here. I just wanted to let you know that after 30 years or so, I have finally released my first book of poetry through the mighty Spartan Press here in Kansas City, Missouri. As the creator and host of both Neon Jazz Radio and the Famous Interviews with Joe Dimino podcast, along with being a visual artist, I'm ready to embark on a new adventure and want you to be a part of it. You can get a copy online via Barnes & Noble, Amazon, and actually on the streets in Kansas City at the great Prospero's bookstore off 39th Street. You can also visit joedimino.com for links to the book, to more poetry, and everything in my world, including paintings. Thanks for all of the love and support over the years, and please dig the words.